Sooryavanshi is the fourth movie in the Rohit Shetty's cop universe after Singham. Singham returns and Simba about badass Indian cops doing all kinds of wacky things and not taking the law all too serious. In this movie we get Sooryavanshi, an ATS chief who has a bad short-term memory for names, who gets to deal with the looming threat of terrorist attacks on Mumbai, loosely based and referenced by the real-life events where 12 simultaneous explosive attacks shook Mumbai and India in 1993. Sooryavanshi has to hunt down the terrorists who wish to explode a bunch of bombs in Mumbai. In the process he falls in love and has plenty of spectacular fights with the baddies. There's an especially spectacular courtyard fight scene and a less spectacular helicopter scene, even though the actor did the stunt himself, and a fairly lame car chase scene with CGI cars at certain points. There's plenty of swooping camera movement and slow-motion badass moving. It's in short an Indian action movie, and that, quite frankly, is fine, but this movie didn't capture me as well as RRR or KGF did. In fact, I found it quite boring and bland and made me decide not to watch the Singham or Simba movies since they get about the same rating as this one. Singham and Simba, by the way, are other badass Indian cops who do wacky things in their own movies and have a cameo in this one. The problem is that both Singham as well as Simba kinda overshadow our dear Sooryavanshi and seem to be far more interesting characters. Whether or not their theme song is equally cool as Sooryavanshi though is unknown to me, cause that theme, my friends, is pretty damn cool. The movie, however, is take it or leave it. It has some fun moments but in the grand scale of things didn't do it for me. Drop that. Otherworld was a series that caught my attention in a Twitter thread about forgotten and obscure television series. It shows us a fairly stable close family of 5 that go on a holiday in Egypt and get scammed into a tour of a pyramid and suddenly are whisked away to a strange, different world. In short, they travel to another dimension into a world that's split up in 70 provinces with each province having different rules. They go from place to place in search of the way back home but are pursued by none other than a character played by Jonathan Banks from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. Having him behind you is a bad thing even in this series where he was much younger than we know him now. Every episode our inquisitive father, independent but loving mother, horny teenage guy, hot teenage girl and not annoying preteen boy have an adventure. Whether they are in an Amazon-like province ruled by women where men are slaves or a province where they don't know rock and roll, every episode is pretty original, except for the one episode that's pretty much a spoof of Beauty and the Beast. Otherworld is a lot like Sliders from the 90s. The only difference is the dynamic between the characters, the fact they're on the same planet and the lack of special effects. It's dated, it's wholesome, it's less bad than I expected, but it's only 8 episodes long and we will never know what the other 62 provinces are like, whether they ever got home and if the horny teenage boy finally gets laid even though he's a chick magnet everywhere. Otherworld in a way was ahead of its time and I think it would do well if it were rebooted now. New cast, updated graphics and hell, we can have the new cast save the old cast while they're at it. Otherworld was a good watch. It's just too short to make it awesome. Check that. Act of Vengeance, which will be easy to find as Rape Squad, is a 1974 movie where we have a pretty woman being brutally raped by a masked man who enjoys raping women while singing Jingle Bells. When her pleas for help fall upon the deaf ears of cops and other men, she decides to do something about it. The cops, by the way, are doing their job. Sure, it's very incompetent, but they have a point that finding a masked serial rapist who leaves no traces is a wee bit hard to track down. Regardless, our victim meets other victims and decides to hunt the bastard themselves. They meet other bastards and deal with them, but our main bastard is something else. Did our female warriors take too many chances, or are they right to take justice in their own hands, no matter what the cost? Act of Vengeance is a simple movie following a typical path of revenge. Unlike ultra-violent sexploitation rampage films, this is pretty tame, which, in a way, brings the movie down a bit. It's comparable to the difference between a TV movie and a cinema movie. Act of Vengeance feels too much like a TV movie. It's realistic but isn't gritty. It's violent but not over the top. It's a harsh reality shown through a slightly simplistic lens. This isn't The Accused, but it isn't I Spit on Your Grave either, and that's pretty much the problem in my opinion. Check that. Shadow Riders is a television film with the legends Tom Selleck and Sam Elliott playing two brothers who were on other sides of the American Revolutionary War. When they return home after getting out of some trouble, they find their family home pretty much ransacked and their siblings kidnapped by Confederate forces who wish to sell them to slavers. This wouldn't be a Western movie if our two heroes went after those people to save their sisters and brother. The Shadow Riders is a family-friendly, almost wholesome Western movie that doesn't make a big deal about Confederate versus Union history. They even have a line where they mention that each man has his own reasons to fight and leave it at that, only to focus on what is really important: your family. And so The Shadow Riders is pretty okay despite being TV and thus PG rated. Tom Selleck as always is super charming and is accompanied very well with Sam Elliott. Even the main villain has his redeeming moment at the end, though the true villain of the show gets dealt with. Oh, and there's 3 people in the barn, but that's just the way it goes. All in all, Shadow Riders is an enjoyable Western movie with a charming cast and story. Just don't expect a spaghetti Western or something with a lot of grit. Check that. The Ghost and the Invisible Bikini is a very 60s movie that is part of something I didn't know existed. The so-called beach party movies was a type of genre that had 7 movies, of which this is the last, where a bunch of teens that could have popped out of a Beach Boys video experience stuff when they party hard between whatever happens. This movie doesn't bring our bikini babes and boys to a beach. However, it brings us to an old English mansion that luckily has a pool. And at that pool, stuff like this happens.
Hey, hey. Come running to you. I'll come running to you. Hey, hey. Geronimo. When you need me. Geronimo. When you want me. Geronimo. Hey, baby, let's go. Geronimo. Geronimo.
Look at those guys and gals go. Anyways, now that you saw this, you pretty much know what type of movie this will be. It's like a live-action Scooby-Doo game that goes into an even more zany vibe. The plot is simple yet weird. A recently deceased guy, played by Boris Karloff, is brought back to life, kinda, and meets his young girlfriend. She tells him in very 60s lingo that he can be young again upstairs if he does something good. Well, thankfully his 3 offspring can inherit all his money, but only if the evil lawyer and his minions don't kill them off first. So his young lady goes off and becomes a ghost with an invisible bikini. But let me stop you right there. The bikini is actually invisible, so you won't see her boobas. It's an early green screen and her boobas, or her bikini really, is invisible. She herself is blue and clearly superimposed on other footage. The plot is silly. The acting is stupid. There's slapstick jokes and goofy happenings, and music by famous artists like Nancy Sinatra and the Bobby Fuller 4 with a lot of bikini people dancing like retards. It's all silly fun and a bit jarring when you think you're getting a 60s horror movie that has some sexploitation. Luckily you people have me to tell you what this movie really is and if it's worth it. Is it worth it? It's worth a watch. It's the least of the beach movies I read, but still, it's so zany you won't think you wasted your time after you've seen it. And it has some pretty boys and sexy gals after all. And singing and dancing, you jive turkey. Drop that. Rescue Dawn is the real-life story of Dieter Dengler, a fighter pilot in the US Army who gets shot down over Laos during a secret mission at the cusp of the Vietnam War. He survives but gets captured by a bunch of sadistic farmers only to end up in a makeshift power camp with other sadistic farmer guards and some other slightly unhinged prisoners. Being the new guy, he concocts a plan to get out of there with his reluctant friends and face the dangerous jungle in search of salvation. Christian Bale plays the fairly positive dieter dangler who enjoys looking dangerous in the eye and makes a joke about it. I don't know how much of this movie is true, but what we see happen is quite impressive. Not only from a survival side but also from a purely human and survival kind of side. Over the course of the movie you of course bond with the characters only to get some expected drama once it happens. It has a lot of build-up but the end result and actual escape is pretty quick. This is not a spoiler BTW since we know this story happened. Rescue Dawn is one of those typical horror yay soldiers kind of movies, and it's pretty good. But with an actor like Christian Bale in it, it's hard to go wrong. Rescue Dawn gets my recommendation, though it's merely good and doesn't get the chance to cross over into great for being a little bit too cookie cutter. Smash that. Mythic Quest is an Apple TV series. I'm looking at you, Tim Cook, you motherfucker, with your design mouse and design toilet. Get the fuck out of here. That is pretty much Grapple TV's version of Community in my humble unbiased opinion. Mythic Quest is the biggest multiplayer video game of all time, created by fictional video game studio Mythic Quest Studios, which has some interesting characters giving up a peek into the Silicon Valley world through the lens of comedy. We are presented with Ian Grimm, who is the alpha male lead and creative director of the bunch. He's based on Jason Vandenwegger, but I personally thought of Major Dickhead Neil Druckmann from The Last of Us 2. There's Poppy, the annoying Asian coder and weakest character of the bunch in my opinion. We have CW, an arrogant old-school novelist who ends up writing for a video game, the money-hungry head of monetization who is played by Danny Pudi, who plays a slightly more evil version of his Abed character from Community. We have the cool but awkward game tester and the annoying lesbian SJW game tester, the insane, violent and verbally abusive assistant, and the cuckold boss and executive producer who tries not to be too much of an offensive white male but fails. There's more characters of course, but these are the main ones, and as you might see it's a very diverse cast with some very woke backstories. Which brings me to this. Is this show woke? The bad woke that is? And I can say that although the veneer of the episodes at first feels woke, it is a very balanced show with plenty of stuff mocking both sides of the island, even bashing down some of the SJW rhetoric for good measure. These are truly a mix of different generations and mindsets working together. It still has the millennial safe space feel where every edge seems filled off and padded with soft plastic, but some of the stuff still pierces through. Like the whole episode where they dealt with Nazis popping up in their game and the laugh out loud swastika of dicks after they spent multiple scenes debating if they should be banned and who else should be put on that list. The end result is quite acceptable. Some of the characters, especially Poppy, are infuriating purely for their acting, which isn't bad per se, but it's just a little too comedy if you get my drift. Loud, obnoxious, hey here's the punchline haha kind of acting which can get grating. The beauty of this show however is, much like Community, its use of one-off episodes that have different characters and only touch Mythic Quest Studios from the offside. There's also a coronavirus lockdown special which, although a touchy subject for me, portrays the whole situation in a most endearing, yet simplistic way. I don't expect a show like this to go into all the bad shit that happened, but still, it was unexpectedly moving. The episodes of the show bring us development problems, internal strife, expansion pitches, and a whole lot of other insider gaming stuff, though there are no wild parties and coke-infused development orgies since they don't do those anymore I guess. Although CW Longbottom as stand-in George R.R. Martin has plenty of stories about hookers in Taiwan. By the length of this review you can see that I kinda enjoyed Mythic Quest despite its connection to Apple and the whole millennial shit. I think that with upcoming seasons, 3 and 4 have already been confirmed. It will continue to grow and hopefully live up to the excellent community who will never have a 7th season and a movie after all. And after seeing that video from Dan Harmon doing that thing plus hearing other stuff about him, I prefer not to anyways. Dirtbag. Anyways, if you like Community, Always Sunny and enjoy Silicon Valley, be sure to check this out. Smash That. Fire Sale is a quaint 1977 comedy movie about a dysfunctional family trying to save their father's business. That father is taking his wife on a vacation to Florida, but of course things go wrong. At the home front, the two sons have their own things to deal with. One son is a reviled coach of a local basketball team who is in dire need of some talent for his failing team and has a disgruntled wife who wants a kid. The other is the asthmatic loser of a son who is supposed to take care of the business but isn't allowed to do anything. Needless to say that things start to get mixed up, and it gets even more complicated when the father's brother, who still thinks he's in World War II, escapes from the asylum. Fire Sale is one of those quirky old comedies that for some reason gets a lot of negative reviews on the web. This is quite the surprise to me, since this film isn't that bad. It's not perfect, that's for sure, but there are some genuinely funny moments in here. Way funnier than most comedies these days, with lame dickwads like Seth Rogen writing the script. What I do object to this movie is that despite the frequent smiles and laugh out louds I had, that it felt a little bit soulless, or at least the characters didn't really feel right. I find it hard to explain, as you can tell, but despite being funny, the film was just a thing you move through from beginning to end. There's no real investment in the characters or plot. I didn't feel for them despite their mishaps. I didn't feel invested in their problem, and most of the characters weren't my cup of people. They weren't annoying enough to get irritated, however, so that's a good thing. Fire Sale isn't the best comedy film out there, but it doesn't happen a lot that I laugh or smile this much during a movie, so in my book it's better than 90% out there. Check that. 1956's BabyDoll was a controversial movie for its time due to the suggestive posters used for its marketing and subject matter. The real movie, however, is a pretty PG for today's standards, even though there is plenty of innuendo. An older man strikes a deal with a rich businessman to marry his very young daughter. The only rule: he cannot touch her until she is 20. Blue-balled, down on his luck and not getting anything but grief from his pretty young and playful wife, he takes drastic measures to up his business. Unfortunately, he dealt with the wrong man, a charming Sicilian who has set his eyes on more than just revenge. BabyDoll, despite not showing any nudity, oozes sex and attraction. Carol Baker is a playful little minx who toys with her husband but finds her match in the Sicilian who knows exactly what he's doing. He seduces her in order to get information and makes her. Well, I'll leave that up to you to find out. BabyDoll is a great film, nicely shot and pure eye candy, with Carol Baker's cat and mouse game with the men around her. It's the age-old tale of a man who doesn't get what he needs, being played with by youth, a youth who, in its own turn, is played by slightly younger, more successful players who are only out for themselves. A love triangle, without the love, so to speak. Great stuff, really, great stuff. Smash That. The Dude in Me isn't a porn movie if you would think that. It's a 2019 movie about a Yakuza boss suddenly finding himself in the body of a fat teenage dweeb after an unfortunate accident. He discovers that his new body is dealing with plenty of bullying and other fun stuff, so he decides to do something about it. When his past all of a sudden pops up, however, things get a little bit more complicated, as they always do. The Dude in Me is a quite funny movie reminiscent of the Freaky Friday films. Having a badass Yakuza inhabit the body of a fat slob is quite the dichotomy, resulting in some funny scenes. Eventually, however, the plot gets a little bit convoluted when his past girlfriend pops up, and a wee bit less funny when other life-changing events happen, but it still manages to entertain more than you would expect. The whole thing kinda feels like an anime, though a little bit less over the top. Regardless, The Dude in Me is quite a good film and worth a watch when you're looking for some light entertainment. Check that.